All right, so it's been a month, so I'm going to assume that most of you do not remember the last thing that we did. I'm not saying anything. All I'm saying is it's been a month, so I think it's good to just kind of recap real quick. Revelation 1, we have the picture of Jesus. And he more or less tells John, write down what I'm going to tell you and what I'm going to show you to send to the 7 churches in Asia. Revelation 2 to 3 is, the letters to the churches, right? And one thing that you notice when you're reading the letters is they constantly are pointing backwards to the image of Jesus, right? From he who holds the sword in his mouth or whatever, right? Like you have this constant pointing back to that vision. And so that vision is the defining thing for the letters. Revelation 4 is, the throne of God, right? I'm going to actually just write that. He who sits on the throne. So you have this picture of heaven. He who sits on the throne. It's repeated over and over again. This worship of God as creator. Worthy are you, O Lord, for you have created all things, and by you all things have their being. Revelation 5, the scroll and the lamb. That's a great way to say that. So you have the scroll in the hand of he who sits on the throne. He says, who is worthy to open a scroll? And no one was found in heaven or earth or under the earth. And John wept and wept. And the elder, I think, says, do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, he who has died and has conquered. And he looks and he sees the Lamb. And then there's worship of the Lamb. And then Revelation 6, what we did the last time we met together is, so six of 7 seals. Okay, so 6 of the 7 seals have been open. I think it is very important that we read 6:17 again and just understand what is being said there. I think it's I have verse 17 written down. So if someone will read 6:17 before we jump in.
For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it?
So in verse 15, we're told that the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and everyone else is crying this out in verse 17. And verse 17 is very important to understanding chapter 7, okay? So you have that question, that declaration. The great day of wrath has come. Who can withstand it? Okay? So when we are... Oh, here we go. So when we read chapter 7, there is a key question that chapter 7 is trying to answer. We sometimes get confused by chapter 7 because it starts off with a statement after this. And a lot of times in our Western thinking, in our modern thinking, when we hear after this, what do we think? Immediately, or we think linearly, right? So here's happened, and then the next thing that happened is here, and we're thinking in a time manner. Caleb brought it up. First thing he said to me is, how about those Jags, right? When I went to bed at 10 o'clock last night, the Jacksonville Jaguars were down 30-20. After this, I woke up and I saw that they won, So when we think after this, we think this comes next linearly. What we will see over and over again is that when John uses this term, he's not thinking linearly, he's thinking visionally. Okay? So you have a vision, and then after that vision, I saw another vision, and after this, I saw another vision, and after this, I saw another vision. And we shouldn't necessarily think of them in chronological order. Sometimes they are, most times they're not. Okay, and so when we're reading this, there is a relationship between chapter 6 and chapter 7. And I believe, in my opinion, 6:17 serves as the background to what is being answered in chapter 7. So the last question is, who can withstand? And there is an answer, right? Like when they're asking this question, the peoples of the earth, which are non-Christians, which are not God's people, they are asking it because they're thinking to themselves, no one can. But there is an answer to it. Who can withstand the wrath? And that answer is what we see in chapter 7. In particular, it's answered ultimately in 7:9 when he says that there is a great multitude standing before the throne and the Lamb. And that's a very important thing, right? Like, and we can look ahead just a little bit. In verse 9, it says, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation and tribe and people and language. And what are they doing? They're standing. They're standing before the throne and the Lamb. And so that question in 6:17, the great day of wrath has come, who can stand? So I think chapter 7 is trying to answer that question. Who can stand? We have an answer. Okay? All right, so then we get to the fun stuff before that. So chapter 7, verse 1 through 8 is where we're going to start, if someone will read that entire passage.
Wow.
After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or on any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having a seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the forehead of the servants of our God. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. From the tribe of Gad, 12,000. From the tribe of Asher, 12,000. From the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000. From the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. From the tribe of Simeon, 12,000. From the tribe of Levi, 12,000. From the tribe of Issachar, 12,000. From the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000. From the tribe of Joseph, 12,000. And from the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000.
All right. So let's look at verse 1 here. It says, after this I saw, this is a common phrase that John will use throughout Revelation, usually introducing a new vision. So we talked about that a little bit already. So we shouldn't necessarily read chapter 7 as chronological. You can if you really want to, but it's probably forcing the issue more than anything. A better option is to just see it as a transitional verse, transitional sentence introducing a new vision. So we had the vision of the seals. We're going to come back to it in chapter 8 because we still have a 7th seal, right? And so this is an interlude, a vision inserted within to kind of answer a question that's been asked. So why a new vision and not chronological? I want to give you some opinions on why I think this is the better way. First off, we have this talk about the 4 winds holding in the 4 corners of the earth. This seems to actually come from Zechariah 6, 1 through 8. There's a mention of something very similar to that. If you read Zechariah, one of the things that it says is that the 4 horsemen in Zechariah go to the 4 corners of the earth. In 6:5 in particular, he mentions the 4 horsemen being the 4 spirits of heaven. And does anybody know what the word in Hebrew is for spirit? Off the top of their head. Yeah. Okay. It's ruah. Ruach. Anybody know what else it could be translated? Nope, not water. So a lot of things that can be translated. It can be translated breath. All right. It can be translated spirit. Okay. So depending on how you want to translate it, you can translate it either way. And so if we recognize that the four spirits could also be the four winds in Hebrew, then what we have here are the four horsemen or winds heading to the four corners of the earth in Zechariah. Where else have we seen four horsemen? Close. Revelation 6, right? He opened up the first seal, and out of that first seal came a voice saying, "Come." And a man on a white horse, dressed all in white, or at least I envisioned them all white. And I envisioned his skin being white. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Coming forth. And then they open up the second seal, and the word says, "Come." And the next horseman comes. And so what I think we're having here is we're coming back, okay, to this before they're released. And then the sealing is taking place. Okay, so again, if we want to think of it chronologically, I think you have Revelation 6, if you're thinking chronologically, happening, but Revelation 7 is happening at the same time. Sometime in this before the horsemen are released to do their damage. Verse 2 to 3 then, we're told, I got too far ahead of myself in my notes here. We're told that an angel comes with the seal of the living God. He is coming out of the east. East in traditional Roman thought was the place of evil. And if you look at a map of the Roman Empire, not this one. So if you look at the map of the Roman Empire, what is east of the Roman? So this light color, I don't know what color this is. Light color here is the Roman Empire in Jesus' day. It extends up here as well. But what's east? Enemies, right? The Parthians. If you read anything in Roman history, you'll see that the Romans tried consistently to defeat the Parthians, and consistently the Parthians did not allow them. Every once in a while they would take control for a little bit, but the Parthians were just nomadic in some ways. And so, yeah, they were in charge, but they really weren't in charge. And consistently they kept losing battle after battle after battle to the Parthians. And so, in Roman thought, when you think of the East, you think of death, you think of destruction, and you think of bad things. But this angel is coming from the East. And so there should be some significance there. We just don't know why John says that. But the fact that he's coming from the East is significant in some way. And he's coming to seal the servants of God. So the question is, why seal the servants? Protection?
From
What's that?
is it to keep the evil one from getting to them, or what?
Okay. Most of us think it is protection. Most people think it's protection. We just have to kind of decide protection from what. Maybe it's physical harm, although that seems kind of weird, strange to us, I would think. Maybe it's spiritual harm, such as from demons, or maybe it's protection from losing their faith and salvation. Those are three options that are typically given. We do see sealing done in the Old Testament, and so I think that should help us decide which is the best option here. So in Ezekiel chapter 9, because you guys read Ezekiel chapter 9 all the time, right? In Ezekiel chapter 9, we're told that God's people are sealed before judgment on Jerusalem. So in Ezekiel 9, God tells a man in linen cloth to go throughout the city of Jerusalem and mark the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over the detestable things that are being done in the temple, which was idolatry. So there would be an idolatrous practice. There's people that are grieving over it, and he's supposed to go and seal these people. Then what follows is events similar to what happens in Exodus 12. Anybody know what happens in Exodus 12? What's that? Just before going out of Egypt. What happens right? Right. What happens right before they get out of Egypt? Yeah, the death angel, right? You have the Passover, okay? And so Exodus 12 is a literary pattern for Ezekiel 9. In particular, the blood of the Passover lamb is spread over the posts, and the angel of death passes over those who are inside those houses, right? And so what Ezekiel 9 does is if you have the seal, the judgment that's coming on Jerusalem is passed over those people, okay? And so if we come back here, we can recognize that probably the best option is the third one when it comes to the judgments. Okay, now what I'm not saying is that you can't lose salvation or faith outside of this, but when it's talking about the judgments coming, the four horsemen, when they appear, there's a seal of protection that Christians are not going to have to worry about some of this stuff. Okay, it's not that we won't be physically harmed, because when some of those horsemen come, you do have disease, you do have sickness, and there's no promise that Christians won't face those things. Similarly, there's no promise that we won't be attacked by demons either, but we do have this protection from God to withstand the judgments that are coming. And that, I think, is what we should be looking here. So what is the seal is the next question we have to ask.
Holy Spirit?
Oh no, I got to read through all my notes. I have some ideas here, so I got to read through all my notes here to make sure I know what I'm doing. What's that? Sorry, what did you say? Blood of Christ. Okay. So one of the things that seals. There's a second thing that was supposed to be asked here. So not only what is the seal, but what does it do? That was the second question that I don't have on here. In a sense, there's a seal that whenever a person sealed something in the Roman world, it was a seal of authentic ownership. And so we still do this some. So if a company makes something, they might go to a car, right? You know what brand car it is generally because they put their seal on it, right? So you can look outside and you can find the Toyotas, or you can find the Mazdas if anybody has a Mazda here or whatever, right? Like you can find it and it's very clear and obvious, okay? And so we have this authentication of ownership. Seals also protected you from harm depending on the type of seal. And so if you were getting a seal from somebody in power, it would allow you to travel to certain places and not be harassed. And so having those seals were important. In Revelation 7, the seal seems to empower the people of God to be able to stand in the face of the great day of judgment, right? In the rest of the New Testament, here, this is where we'll get to what you said. In the rest of the New Testament, the Holy Spirit is the Christian seal. So I think in Ephesians, in particular, it says that we have been sealed with the Holy Spirit. And so this is probably what Revelation 7 is talking about as well. So the seal that's being placed on them is the Holy Spirit that empowers them and helps them to withstand on the days of judgment. We should also note before we move away from here that the beast will seal all of his followers in 13:17 and in 14:9 through 11. So even though we're going to get a number here, we should not assume that only 144,000 are sealed. Okay, if the beast is sealing all of his people, it would make sense that he's imitating God, who seals all of his people. Okay, the fact that the beasts are sealing all of his followers should assume then that all Christians are sealed, and I think we'll see that once we get into the numerology. The great fun parts, verses 4 through 8, we have a list here, and we have the question, who are the 144,000?
There are 12,000 of the tribe of Isaiah, or
Israel. You mean Israel. 12,000 from each tribe of Israel is what you're saying, right?
Number of completion.
basically
The 12.
Jacob's boys.
Yeah, Jacob's voice. Yeah, Jacob is Israel. So, all right. So here's a couple options. Is it a literal number of ethnic Jews sealed and saved in a special way? Some do consider this a literal number and that it's speaking about ethnic Israel. Most commentators that think this believe that it will take place during a 7-year tribulation period. The biggest problem is you have to read this literally, this whole passage literally. And I think that isn't necessary. And in fact, we should try avoiding reading Revelation literally in general. Others think that it is a literally speaking about the Jews, but figuratively speaking about how many. So this are ethnic Israel being saved. And the next group that we're going to see in verse 9 is everybody else. Okay, that's how they would read this. And you could probably get that, especially if you read Romans 11:24 through 26, where Paul says, it is my prayer that all Israel will be saved. And he says that, all Israel will be saved. And so they're reading that in that light. Another option is that these are Christian Jews living before Jerusalem fall. This is a particular group that reads it this way. They are called preterists, thinking that Revelation speaks about everything before the fall of Jerusalem and that none of it is really talking about our time or beyond. Okay, so that is what they would say. I think the last way is the best way, and that both of this is figurative. Not just Israel is not a literal Israel, but figurative Israel, and the 144 is figurative as well. Why should we view the number figuratively? Well, here's what we can do. This is either 12 squared times 10 squared, right? That gives you 144,000. Is that right? Hundreds. 10 cubed. Oh, times 10. 10 squared times 10. Okay, yep, there we go. 10 squared times 10. There we go. I was like, that's not right. Okay. Or 12 squared times 1,000. Either way, you get to that same number. It doesn't really matter. We talked about in the introduction to all of this that numbers are important and understanding Jewish thinking of numbers is important. 12 represents the completion of God's people. Okay, and it should be viewed that way. It's not the completion of Israel, it's the completion of God's people. And so 12 squared, any multiples, is just a fuller understanding of that. So not only do we have the completion of God's people, we have the complete completion of God's people. Additionally, 10 operates in that same way. And so if you either way, multiples of 10, it still works the same way. It's a completion of God's people. And so we have not just the completion of God's people, but the total number, right? Like a vast number. Like thousands, one of the largest numbers that they thought of in Roman ideas. Okay? And so this is a big number. For us, we're starting to think in trillions, right? Or at least our government is. I'll never see it, but the government thinks it sees it. So we would say it a little bit differently. We don't think numbers in this way, but they do. Okay. What's that? Yes, yeah. Someday I'll have $1 trillion and it won't be worthless. That's right. So we do have to ask then the question: why the tribes? Why does he list these names of the tribes? We should note first off that this is not a traditional list. Why is it not a traditional list? Dan isn't there. Do you find Ephraim? Is it in the correct birth order? Huh? Well, the firstborn is not Judah, and we start with Judah. Additionally, we get Joseph randomly inserted, right? And Joseph is never inserted in any of the lists, okay? Or at least not traditionally. So we don't have a traditional list, which makes it kind of hard to say that this is Israel, because like a literal Israel, that literally 12,000 from each tribe is going to happen, because it's not even all the tribes. So to take this literally is a stretch. Additionally, by AD 90, the 10 tribes had lost their identification, and Judah and Levi were also in the process of losing their identification after the fall of Jerusalem. So like after they came back from the exile, they didn't know where they were from unless they were from Judah or Levi. Okay, so we call them the 10 lost tribes. They had already lost their ethnic identity. All right. Then after the fall of Jerusalem, all of that disappears. So it's very hard to take this literally. We probably should view this as figurative. Oh, and I repeat myself here. Sorry. All right, the last thing is the New Testament tends to use Israelite language in application to the church. What I mean by that is the church tends to be representative as Israel. So when they talk about ethnic Israel, they usually use the word Jew. In the New Testament, the ethnic Israel is usually Jew, and spiritual Israel is Israel. They use the word Israel when they use that. So like when you read Romans 9 through 11 in particular, Paul uses both words, and you have to kind of figure out why he's doing that. And a lot of times it comes down to this. And so when he says, not all Israel is Israel, right? Like that's the one phrase where you have to be like, okay, what do you mean by that, Paul? And we have to figure that out. And so, yeah, the spiritual Israel, as Caleb said, is the church, or what we could call as people who believe in Messiah, right? Because it can consist of Israel ethnically, but also Gentiles. And so what I think is happening here is that he is trying to view this 144,000 as the people of God, which consists of both Jews and Gentiles. And this is who's being redeemed. There is one other view that we should just for a moment consider, and that is a view that says that the 144,000 is a figurative group that serves as the military arm of the church or of God's people. So to get this, they note that any time that there is a census done in the Old Testament, do you know why they did the censuses? Censuses? Censi? It's probably censi. What's that? To see how many fighting men they had. So anytime a census was done in Old Testament, it was always to count how many fighters they were. And this list feels like a census if you read the Old Testament in here. Revelation 14 will also mention this 144,000 coming with Jesus to fight. Okay. This view also views that 1,000 should not be necessarily read as a number, but as a military term, kind of like legion was a military term. I don't know where I feel about this. I do, if you do take this view, I say it's not an excuse to form a Christian army. Because one thing that you'll note in Revelation is there's a whole list of battles, but do you know how many battles are actually fought? None. Because Jesus shows up and it's over. So there is no actual fighting taking place. And so we shouldn't use this as this. Oh yeah, that's what I said. So while battles are named in Revelation, no battle is ever actually fought. And so I don't think we should read it in that light. I don't have a what do we learn here, because I put it at the end of chapter 7, because I think this next part actually goes with it. And so if someone wants to read 9 through 17.
After I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and in front of the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands. And they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb." All the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living creatures. They fell down on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, "Amen. Praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and strength be our God forever and ever. Amen." And then one of the elders asked me, "These in white robes, who are they, and where did they come from?" I answered, "Sir, you know." And he said, "These are they who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will spread his tent over them. Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat upon them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes."
All right, so how does this begin? In verse 9? After this, right? And again, this is where we have to kind of make decisions. This phrase is going to appear over and over again. Should we read it chronologically? I tend to say no. And so what you have is Revelation 6 has happened. We have that question that's trying to be answered. Then you have Revelation 1 through 8 as an answer to that question, but also inserted somewhere in 6. And then Revelation 7, 9 through 17, being in conjunction. We shouldn't see these as two different people, but one group of people and two different visions, is my opinion on this, okay? So we're still answering that question, who can stand? The first vision of chapter 7 speaks about how God protects his people so that they can stand. And the second vision expands upon that first. Just so that we're not confused, 144,000 are not all that are going to be saved, okay? And so that's I think what John is trying to do here. A great multitude is standing there. Then we have this fourfold declaration. All right, what does the number 4 represent again? I know it's been a while. So anytime we have 4 of something, we're talking about the complete, a complete idea, especially in regards to the world, or to the earth. So this great multitude, they come from where? Everywhere. Okay, that's the concept there. So we're talking about the complete people of the earth. Everyone, all peoples will be there. This should probably remind us of the promise to Abraham, right? You'll be a father of many nations, right? And Galatians 3 in particular, Paul says that includes the Gentiles, who are the spiritual descendants of Abraham. All right, and so we should have that in there. They are wearing what? White robes and holding, right. Both of these are symbols of victory in Jewish thoughts. We can look at, I know we don't usually look at this, but we can look at 2 Maccabees 11:8, 1 Maccabees 13:51, the testimony of Naphtali 5:4, in which all of those are Jewish writings of this time period talking about the whites that the people of God will wear in victory. Okay? And so I'm not saying that these are necessarily authoritative. I'm just saying if you want to know Jewish thought, you should read them. Micah 5:7-8 also has this, especially in the Septuagint version. It talks about the saved remnant is like a lamb, but also like a lion ready to devour its enemies.
You said Micah,
Micah, yep, that's my last one here.
as in your son Micah?
No, as in the Old Testament prophet Micah 5:7-8. You're good. Yeah, see, the problem is when you name your kids after prophets like Isaiah and Micah and Nehemiah, you kind of get stuck eventually saying their names. Then in 7:10, we have a new song, right? They sing out in a new song. Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Salvation can be translated as victory or deliverance. Okay, and so if we're thinking of this white robes as a sign of victory, the declaration is victory belongs to our God. Deliverance belongs to our God. Who can stand? God can make us stand. Okay, here we probably have end time salvation in mind. And I answered my question. Who can stand? The saved can stand, right? And that is the idea here. Salvation includes the idea of perseverance, not preservation. I know it auto corrected on me there. Perseverance, not preservation. Although the concepts are the same, right? Sort of. All right. It also includes God's sovereignty, right? Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne. He is king. And so we have this idea of salvation is a result of his sovereignty. Verse 11, not only do the saved praise God, but now all of heaven joins in, right? All of heaven shouts amen, which is a word saying this is true. Truly salvation belongs to our God and to the Lamb. And then we have a repeat of the sevenfold declaration of praise that we found in chapter 5, right? Praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and strength be to our God. Now, before we get confused, an elder comes and he says, hey, who are these in white? This is typical Old Testament prophet conversation. So the prophet will see a vision. An angel will come and say, do you understand the vision? The prophet usually says, nope. Can you help me? And that's more or less what John says, right? Like, do you know who these are in white are? Nope. You know. You can tell me. And he tells them, right? And who are they?
They are those who come out of the Great Tribulation.
Yes. Right. They come out of the Great Tribulation. That's an interesting phrase, the origin of the phrase. Anybody know where it comes in the Old Testament? It's in the Old Testament. Ooh. See, this is why the Old Testament matters, especially when you're reading Revelation. Nope. It's actually in Daniel. Daniel chapter 12. Probably Daniel 12:1 is the context for this. In chapter 12, talking about the Great Tribulation, they're probably talking about Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Antiochus IV, he brings about, he's one of the two, so there are two people fighting over Israel, the Ptolemies in Egypt and the Seleucids in Syria and Babylon. And they're constantly fighting with each other over this land. During Antiochus' time, he's in control of it. He goes down, he fights a battle in Egypt. He loses very badly. And so as he's coming back up, he raids the temple in Jerusalem for its money because he's just lost a big war and has had to pay people. Then After that, he ends up setting an image of Zeus in the temple, and he takes a pig and he sacrifices it on the altar of God to Zeus. Lots of bad things happen there, right? Like pigs are unclean, should not be sacrificed. It's on the altar of God. That's bad. It's just desecrated the altar. It's to Zeus on the Temple Mount. A lot of bad things, right? And they often called it in Daniel the abomination of desolation. And so then, what's that? And the Maccabees were born, exactly. So actually, I have that down. So Antiochus Fourth Epiphanes, when you read in Maccabees 9:27, they believe that they are living in the Great Tribulation, okay, of Daniel. So they are interpreting the Great Tribulation as their time period, okay? I think Daniel's prophecy is fulfilled in that, but John foresees another such situation for the church. And I think we could argue that the church constantly faces quote-unquote great tribulations in history. Diocletian was an emperor who more or less said that if you must sacrifice to me or you'll die. Now in Rome, that for some reason that didn't actually take, but down here in the southern portion of the Roman Empire, they actually followed through with that. And so if you did not sacrifice, you died. And so a lot of Christians died because they wouldn't sacrifice. Other Christians gave up their scriptures and sacrificed, believing that I know Diocletian isn't really a god, so it's okay for me to do this. And there's a huge divide in the church in the South around 300 AD as a result of it. But that's that's right around the corner for John.
Do you think it was in the South just because Egypt has such a tradition of worshiping leaders?
Yes. It's a difference in mentality. Like some said, okay, every even though they're emperors, and by this time he's ruling in the East anyways, Diocletian, he sets up like a 4-part system. And so he's more powerful here. I mean, we're talking about a people group in Revelation that their whole society is starting to follow emperor worship. And it really takes hold in Ephesus and this whole region a lot faster than everywhere else. All right, it's very early in this period. So yes, they have a whole system, especially Egypt where the pharaohs were gods, literally. Right? The Ptolemies were gods, literally, on earth. And so yes, very much so, this group becomes much more willing to do that because it's natural for them. And much more willing to kill the Christians because they're not. By this time, the Roman Empire is starting to fall into decay, and Diocletian's solution is we need to get back to what made us great in the first place, and that was worshiping the gods of Rome, which includes me now. I'm a god of Rome now, right? And so then, yeah, very much so. So yeah, I think we could say that is a great tribulation for them. I think we can look at the Protestant Reformation period in which Christians died left and right because they didn't agree with each other. Both sides. I think that's a tribulational period. I think we can look at our modern world today. More Christians have died in the last 100 years than at any other point in all of history combined. Not in America, so we don't see it, so we don't think about it. But they're dying significantly. And if you don't think that they think they're living in a great tribulation, then we're not thinking correctly. And so I think we can view this not just as a one-time event, but as an event that is cyclical and happens. And we should prepare ourselves for one. I mean, a church in America could easily become another great tribulation moment. And some will stand and some won't. And I think that's what we get here from Revelation here in particular. So I have on there those 4 things. In the New Testament, there is a sense of a major end-time tribulation that will happen in history. And so maybe John's referencing that in particular, but I think he's probably referencing more than just that. Interesting, no matter where you're at in history, everybody believes that they are in one. So We should note that as well. So everyone thinks they're in one, and so we might be in it, we may not be. It's just kind of those things. But it is those that come out of it, those who have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb, that's what makes their robes white, which is kind of oxymoronic in our minds, right? Like if I dip my clothes in blood, it comes out brown, right? Like it's not usually white, but Jesus' blood does something different. Lastly, verse 15 through 17, we have the hints of final rewards. We're not going to discuss too much about them because they are discussed fully in chapters 21 through 22, but they are hinted at in the letters. So we've already had some hints from the letters of these rewards, being dressed in white, standing before the throne, never hungering, never thirsting, tears being wiped away, like pain being gone. Like those have been hinted at, and so we're going to get this here. So rewards are for all Christians, not just those who die at the end, right? Like I think that is why I would think that this isn't necessarily the end time great tribulation, but the tribulation that comes with being a Christian. Oh yeah, more than just one final tribulation for the church. So, because all of these things are promised to us. All right, so what do we learn from the entirety of this chapter?
The Great Tribulation.
Persevere through tribulation.
Okay, persevere through tribulation.
There will be protection in our perseverance.
Yes, I think that's good. There's more than 144,000. Yeah. I come back to that question, right? The question is, who can stand? Who can stand in the great day of wrath? All right, and so I have here, many will stand on the great day of wrath if they wash themselves in the blood of the Lamb, and only the Lamb provides protection from that ultimate judgment. So again, we have to read chapter 7 in light of chapter 6, right? So chapter 6, you have those 4 horsemen, and then 2 other really big things that happen that's causing the peoples of the earth to say, fall on us, O earth, right? Kill us now, because who can stand on this great day? And the answer is, you can if you're washed in the blood of the Lamb.